Hey, speaking of biblical discernment and prophetic times, back in September, the 14th, it would be, there were some very disappointed people in the pre-trib rapture community there. I don't know if you heard this or not, but many in the blogosphere, in the YouTubeosphere, and I suppose many high-profile men of God out there. I don't take this away from them. I believe they love the Lord, and I just think they're wrong about eschatology, but they earnestly believed and taught. Some of these YouTube channels have tens of thousands of followers, believed and taught that the rapture would happen September the 13th on the Feast of Trumpets, Carl. Yeah. And they were throwing that in with the blood moon convergence and the Shemitah. They were looking at all these converging events in the sun, moon. The Bible says there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, et cetera, et cetera. And they're looking at all this and they're going, okay, the rapture is what Paul described as the last trumpet. And so they're saying that the rapture has to happen on the Feast of Trumpets, which is Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. That's when the rapture has to happen, and it was supposed to happen, Carl, according to these people, September 13th. Right. So, but yet here we are. As far as I know, these people are still making videos, so they're still here.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah. Well, listen, let's talk about that. And before we do, let me just make clear to our listeners, and of course, Mike, I know you agree with this. I want our listeners to know when Mike was just talking about, the Shemitah predictions and the blood moon predictions, of course, immediately we think of the two most famous names attached to the Shemitah unveiling or revelation and the blood moon revelation, and that would be Jonathan Cahn and Mark Biltz. Now, let me just say, I happen to know both of those guys personally, very personally, and I happen to also to know that neither one of them made specific predictions about specific dates and a specific thing that would happen on a specific date. What both of those guys did was merely report what the Shemitah cycle was all about, and that the Shemitah cycle was, reaching some fulfillment in September of 2015. Mark Biltz merely reported what was on NASA's website about the blood moon and the tetrads and the history of the tetrads, and then he did some research and discovered that on the history of many of these blood moon tetrads, as they fell on Passover and Tabernacles, that some amazing things happened, mainly in relation to Israel, and so they wrote books about it, and and articles, and they did interviews, but it's interesting, Mike, because of that fever pitch interest in those topics. A lot of people piled on trying to get some kind of fame and fortune out of it, I suppose. Right. And they did make predictions. And it's unfair to Jonathan and Mark because they got tagged with a lot of that. I mean, people started talking about how Jonathan Cahn was making predictions and Mark Biltz was making predictions when they didn't. They didn't. No. And yet I know some of the hosts that interviewed them did, and I felt sorry for those guys. I know a lot of people on YouTube did and attached their names to it. But anyway, I just want to make that clear. But we're not talking about Cahn and Biltz. In fact, we're talking about some specific people that we know, and we're not going to give them free advertising on Freedom Friday, so we're not going to use their names. But these are because nobody associated with us or that we consider close friends were making any kind of rapture prediction whatsoever. Right. No, and we don't do that. We do not set dates. What PNN does, what Mike Shoesmith does, and what I do is we look at the scriptures concerning the signs of the last days, and then we measure them against the geopolitical events that have unfolded in the last several hundred years and in the last couple of decades and in the last couple of weeks, if you will, and we're watching and reporting continually this convergence of undeniably prophetic events. And when I say undeniably, some of them are open to speculation, but the fact that Israel is back in the land, that's not open to speculation. The fact that Russia and China are now in the Middle East in cahoots with Iran, that's not open to speculation. The fact that ISIS has exploded on the Euphrates River, and the vast majority of their strongholds are on the Euphrates River, and that the Euphrates River is mentioned in the Bible as the hotbed of last days explosion, that is not open to speculation. So these are the kind of things we're looking at, and we're just saying, listen, we're living in prophetic times. But like you said, beginning this segment, there are people out there who set a specific date and said the rapture was going to happen on September 13th, and some of these people were mocking us for the contextual biblical stand we've been taking.
Well, that's very well said, Carl. And I just want to tell people out there that, we have interviewed people with rapture dates, and we have sort of been curious about their take on things, and we're done with that. We are done with that. We believe that what Jesus said in Matthew 24, that it will happen at a time when you think not.
Yeah.
So when you least expect it, that's when it's going to happen. So if you guys are following out there, if you're following these so-called ministries who are teaching dates, who are teaching that it has to be on the Jewish New Year calendar of the Jewish calendar because it has to be during the Feast of Trumpets, that is all, may I say, nonsense. It will not happen. Listen, the Bible is clear. It will happen at the last trumpet. The last trumpet is Revelation 11, not Revelation 4:1. There's no rapture there. We are already in the trumpet days of Revelation. Would you not agree?
Well, that certainly is my best biblical speculation. That is my best and most humble opinion. I write about it in the book Final Warning. I document it profusely. I'm always open to correction. I'm always open to the Lord correcting us as we move forward. But I'm an unashamed historic premillennialist, which was the major view of Christian scholarship for the first 1,800 years of Christian scholarship, including the first 300 or 400 years of the early church fathers. It was the predominant view, which has been documented even by rabid pre-trib experts. And I say rabid, that's a pejorative. I didn't mean to say that. But adamant pre-trib experts have had to admit in writing. I think of Dr. David Reagan in the book Wrath and Glory on page 112 and 113. He admits that the historic premillennialist view was the view of the early church fathers. And what does the historic premillennialist view believe? It believes that the church more than likely will go through the entire Great Tribulation, if not the majority of it, and that the trumpets in Revelation are things that will happen before the rapture, and most historic premillennialists look at that seventh trumpet vision in Revelation as being the final trumpet, the last trumpet. And by the way, it's the last time the word trumpet is used in the Bible, so it literally is the last trumpet. And they look at that as a picture of the rapture of the church. And so that's where I stand. And I know people listening to this who disagree vehemently with that would try to call me some kind of a heretic, but all I can say is I'm taking the stand that Christian scholarship took for 1,800 years. I am not a pre-tribber. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is a pre-tribulation rapture, but I see it the way Christian scholarship saw it for 1,800 years, including the people who were closest to the disciples of Jesus themselves, the early church fathers. And I don't make any apologies for that, Mike.
Well, I mean, the Bible clearly points to in my view of things, the way I look at the dynamics on the world scene today, they all point to the imminency, if not a current fulfillment, as we look at the headlines today, of the sixth trumpet of Revelation. Yeah. We're already in those days. The way I see it, the first five trumpets. Listen, folks. If you're one of those people who are licking your wounds after, standing on your rooftop on September the 13th, waiting for the Lord to rapture you out, I'm sorry for you. I really am. But please consider what we're saying here. The rapture is the seventh trumpet, Revelation 11. We are getting very close. So please examine our material on this. Get the book Final Warning. We're not here to sell books.
Right.
We're here to educate people because the end time is not coming. the end time is now.
Yeah, we're in those prophetic days, to be sure. And of course, we don't set dates, but we can certainly say we're in very prophetic times. And you mentioned a little while ago that we have interviewed people who have been date setters, and we do that because we are a news reporting agency. That's one of our ministries, is to report other people's views and what's going on and what are some of the predominant things being talked about on the internet and in cyberspace. And so, of course, we're going to interview those people. We've never endorsed them, and we've never held them up as speaking truth. We're just, we're doing our job and kind of reporting and collecting information and educating people. And I think most of the people that are subs at PNN, News and Ministry Network, they appreciate that, just so they can know what's being said out there. But but listen, folks, if you're listening to this and you're saying, but wait a minute, the seals, you're trying to say all the seals, all the 6 seals are done and passed, and now we're into the trumpets. How can that be? Because the seals speak of the wrath of God. Listen, I deal with all of that in the book Final Warning. You've got to understand. I'm going to say this very quickly, and then we got to close. The book of Revelation is written, as most prophetic scripture is, as the first 3 chapters of Genesis are. It's written in a recapitulation process. It's written in a point of making a statement and then backing up and focusing in and looking at something closer. Again, Mike, I give this illustration profusely in my book, but let me just say, Genesis, the first couple of verses, opens up making this declaration, this huge general declaration that God created everything. And then, starting in verse 3 and following, it tells us how he did it. And so it backs up, and now it focuses on that great big general declaration. And now the rest of Genesis 1 focuses on how it all happened in great detail. And it ends with the creation of man. And then Genesis 2 opens up with, and thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. But then when you go on in Genesis 2, you find that it backs up again and focuses in on the creation of man and gives great detail about how that occurred. Well, what are we watching here? Are we watching 3 different creation accounts? No, it's one creation account with the recapitulation process being used to get us closer and closer and more focused on what is important. And I maintain, and have for 30 years of ministry, the book of Revelation is written the same way. The seals are the general declaration of what is going to happen in the last days. The 7th seal opens into the 7 trumpets. And by the way, at the end of the 7 trumpets comes the 7 bowls of wrath. So the 7th seal opens into the trumpets and the bowls of wrath. So what's it doing? It's backing up. It's focusing in on the very last days of seal number 5 and 6, if you will. That's what seal 7 is doing, and that's what the trumpets are doing, in my humble opinion. And again, from a historic premillennialist view, the first 1,800 years of Christian scholarship. So again, I'm open to correction, always contextual biblical correction, but I do not apologize for having the view that Christian scholarship had for 1,800 years.
Well, and you're not a lone wolf in this. Many people have come to the exact same conclusions. I came to very similar, if not identical, conclusions before I ever met you.
Yes.
And I think that's why the Lord brought us together in ministry, is because how can 2 brothers walk together unless they be in agreement? And so we were already in agreement on this before we ever met. So the Lord is showing this information to many, many people. Yeah,
and now that the book Final Warning is out, and now it's in audio format, and it has gone all over the world and still going, millions and millions and millions of people around the world are seeing the same thing. And like you, many of them are saying, hey, I saw this before I even knew the book was out, but now the book documents and with references and resources. And so, people are getting it, and they're seeing that, look, it can't be denied. The Euphrates River is the central hotbed of what's happening right now. ISIS is there. China is there. Russia is there. Israel is there. A return to Israel. Iran is there. Iran is making compacts with Russia and China and dealing in nuclear arms. And Palestine is being called for by the Pope. And a one world order is being called for by the Pope and the UN. I mean, on and on and on this goes. And all of it leaps off the pages of the Bible into our laps right now, today in 2015.
It's amazing. It's amazing.